Dave, I'm killing time, so you can just come over here. Yeah, so got my 10-year award in April being at West USA. Feels like dog years, so I feel like I've been doing this for about 70 years.
Well, you've been doing it a lot longer than 10 years, Mark.
And speaking of somebody who's not 70 but looks like they're 70, no, I'm kidding. All right, so as promised, we have David Pruitt joining us today. If you're not familiar with David Pruitt, he runs the Pruitt team, one of the most prolific real estate teams in the entire, not going to say just West USA, but the entire state of Arizona. And if you do any type of property management, you know David Pruitt because he is the director of our property management division. David, thanks so much for stepping in and joining us today. How are you, man?
Good. How about yourself?
Good. You're going to have to get real close to that microphone. Yeah.
Right up to it.
Yeah. Pretend it's a
I'm
Big
just
Mac.
used to yelling.
No, it's a Big Mac. Get in there. Just get into that Big Mac.
It's a McRib.
Oh, yeah. McRib. All right, so
Mike's getting hot and bothered here on the McRib.
oh god, well Todd brought it up.
I have to because it's the only thing that'll make absolutely change Mike's plain of thought. If you just say McRib, he's lost. He's like all of a sudden totally on food.
That's a fact.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to let you choose, Dave, because I was going to start off by saying, hey, let's talk about the buyer broker agreement. You run a pretty good sized team. How you guys are preparing your agents to have these discussions, but then Todd and I and Matt were just having a discussion kind of about the market and so forth. What do you want to talk about first?
Oh, wow. I feel like that's a loaded question. I guess we can talk a little bit about what I'm doing with our team.
Okay,
That might be helpful.
So are you familiar with these NAR changes in the lawsuit? And I don't know whether you're familiar and been following it, but
I'm not under a rock.
We're changing the buyer broker agreement, and it's going to become a required document come I don't know now because Armless is pushing their date up to August 1st. So I don't know necessarily. I really don't know when it's going to become a required document. Todd, do you?
Yeah. The moment that AAR publishes something on Transaction Desk and it shows up in your Transaction Desk document stack, that is now considered in the industry the standard of care. So you're supposed to cease using every prior document and immediately begin using that document. So that
that's not the question.
August 1st.
I understand that.
Misunderstood.
We're being told August 17th.
Oh, yeah.
We are required. We can't show a home to a buyer without them signing a buyer broker agreement, but now Armless is making their changes August 1st, so that's where I'm confused.
Yeah, well, the 17th is just clearly an NAR deadline to the MLSs in the marketplace. They have to comply by that day. They can comply earlier, as Armless has always done, but in this particular case. So yeah, I mean, it's going to become effective the moment the documents change, and then the MLS has to be able to support the changes in the document. It's just not there's so many different layers of this industry, but yeah.
All right, so David, how are you? What are the conversations you're having with your team? How are you preparing them? What are you doing with your team?
A lot of deep breaths and telling them to not panic. But in all seriousness, for me, it feels a lot like business as usual in the sense of, the good agents have been doing something similar for years. And so for me, it's just to try to get them to more calm down for their own peace of mind. Because, again, it's just one more document, one more, conversation that has to happen. And ultimately, I feel like a lot of people, and you and I are a part of a lot of the same mastermind groups, a lot of people are just feeling, that this is, just another conversation that they need to have and that they're prepared to do. I feel like everyone gets so hot and bothered that it's going to be like, I have to sell myself and I have to go out and learn all these new techniques and all these new sales, paths. And that's not the case. I mean, ultimately, it's the same conversation that we're having with our clients. We're just going to have them sign, one more form as part of that process.
Yeah, but for me, I think that the changes, and I do agree with you. I think maybe it's a little bigger of a deal. To me, it's a little bit bigger of a deal because the buyer broker agreement, basically, it's not going to change a ton. It is the same thing. It is the same discussions. But prior to these changes, in the majority of cases, it could easily be assumed that the seller was paying for compensation to the buyer's agent. Now, I could be having conversations with first-time FHA home buyers that only have, they're putting 3.5% down. They've got 3.5% down. And just in order to show them a home, they have to understand that in the event that the seller is not going to offer any concessions to me as the buyer agents, you now have to. I think it's a tough conversation
Yeah.
for a lot of types of buyers.
I think that's fair. I mean, what I would say is, I don't know how many new homes you're going into, but it's a similar process when we're walking into the new homes, right? Where it's like, hey, I need you to fill out this form. And the client looks at you going like, why am I filling this out? Like they don't, newer, inexperienced home buyers, they don't understand that. And it's the same conversation of, hey, don't go to those new builds without me being present because of this. And so again, I feel like it is a similar conversation. I was talking to you, before we went on, and Northern Arizona has already released their changes to the MLS, and so they're going to actually have a category.
What's the name of that MLS?
Anomalous.
Anomalous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so they've already released it saying that they're going to have a category for seller concessions. And so they've already given an education piece out on that, talking about what that's going to be designated for. And so, it'll be interesting to see what happens with us locally here. But that is something I think will help, right? If we have a category like that where you're going into it telling your clients, or knowing going into that, hey, we've got some concessions, we have some room.
And you've already signed the buyer-broker agreement. So let's say you've signed the buyer-broker agreement, let's just save 3%, but and I'm only can speak for Narmless now because I have no idea what Narmless is doing. So if the seller concessions on that plano says 5%, I can then deduct and have that conversation with my buyer going, listen, 3 of that 5% might be going to daddy.
And I think this is a great time to pause and talk about our advertisement for Dwayne's meeting on Thursday.
Facts.
Seriously, yeah. July 11th, be there, be square. But the thing is yes, there's the buyer beware in this is all of a sudden turned back on. So in essence, back in the 80s, there was this thing called caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. It is back because it's not that you have to use any standardized document. It's considered the standard of care, and the AAR's documents are there to protect us. However, a brokerage could create their own buyer-broker agreement, and the DOJ would prefer that brokers create their own. But the quagmire to the consumer is not, did you just sign let me see what you signed, because they could have received a document from a company created one that says something totally different than what the AAR document says. And so this is going to be where consumers are going to be tricked into doing things and signing documents that they have no idea what they're signing. You do not have to have at this particular moment, an employment agreement with a buyer unless you're an MLS participant. In that particular situation, you would. Well, we all are here at our company. And so the fact is yes, you will have to have a conversation with a buyer before. Now, it isn't about showing somebody a property. This is the misleading conversation. It's about representing a person. So we should stop with the vernacular of you have to have a buyer broker signed with somebody before you can show them a property. And you should think of it as I have to establish a relationship, a client relationship with my client before I begin my services. And think about it. Would you ever want to work for free?
Okay, but that's the perfect world. In our world, a lot of us are working internet leads, Zillow leads, Realtor.com leads, OpCity leads. Yep. Okay, operator gets us on the phone with somebody. I've got 3 minutes to go set that appointment and meet them at the house. There is no establishing this trustworthy relationship and all this stuff. I'm now in a situation where I've got to let them in the house. Do I need a buyer broker agreement to show them that house? That's the question I'm asking, Todd.
Well, the first question is no. If it's if it's listed with the firm that you,
let's say it's not.
Okay, if it's not, but if it was, then you have dual agency anyway. So if it's not, then yeah, I mean, from that particular perspective, what is showing a home? Showing a home is part of the real estate services I'm providing to you. So yes, you would have to, and you would have to, if you're going to meet them at the property, which is probably not a recommended thing to do, then at that particular point, have them meet you at the office, have them meet you at a coffee shop, sit down, slow the conversation down. Before you show them the property, they're willing to do a lot of things.
Yeah, and I think, I understand that, and I am on the side with Mike, is that becomes a tough conversation as someone who worked Zillow Flex Leads for a lot of years, is that
there's no slowing down that conversation.
Oh, there isn't, and they don't want you to. I mean, they'll actually penalize you on the conversation if that's what you're having. Yeah. So, they want you, basically from the time you take that call, they've got a stopwatch on you of when you're going to go get them in that home. And so, but I do think that it becomes more, I don't know on your team, Mike, if you guys do a lot of, talking this through and kind of role playing it out. We try to do that as much as possible, but I do think it's helpful, especially in these situations. I think it's going to be really key to have a script that you're going to have in your brain, and ultimately everyone's going to personalize that to themselves to how they can best sell it. But, I would tell you that I do think that is a challenge on those lead gen services. And, I know that's something we'll probably hit here in a second, but, that's really my main thought on it.
So let me just make sure that I'm clear with what you guys are saying. I'm talking about having to have a conversation with somebody before you begin your real estate services. Okay, that's the way the laws and the rules are written. That's the way NAR's policies are established to do what we're about to do and to do what we're doing every single day. No matter what we want to say, David, you hit it on the head. It's what conversation are we having? The end result is the same. If you are working with someone and that person has chosen you to represent them, get that? They have chosen you to represent them. Then you have them sign the buyer-broker agreement and you move forward.
And I appreciate that, but that's not the real world that our agents are living in. I get a...
Maybe not today, but it is going to be the one that you're living in August 17th.
It's not going to change. If I get a Zillow lead, if I get a Realtor.com lead, and they get me on the phone right now, my job is to set an appointment to go show them that home. As to Dave's point, I get penalized. I will get less leads if I say, hey, you know what? Before we go take a look at the house, I need you to come over to the office. We're going to have some coffee. We're going to have some muffins. We're going to go over to my buyer presentation, all that stuff. My job is to get you over to that house.
No, that's the conversion job.
Yeah, and then now my point is now before I open up that door, before I let you in, okay, you're going to have to sign a buyer broker agreement. I don't have, it's 100.
Only if they want to work with you.
It's 125 degrees out. Yeah. I'm not sitting outside for 20 minutes going through my buyer presentation.
Well, that might be a benefit though. 120 degrees, they may want to get in there really bad. So you're like, hey, here's my single property. Here's my single property buyer broker. I need you to sign before we walk in the store. I mean, and that might be the way that's happening. We might see a little bit more deals done on the hood of a car, as far as a buyer broker agreement. That might be what happens. I mean, I think ultimately, again, kind of steering it back a little bit is that like it is the conversation. And whether we like it or not, it's happening. It's coming for us. I do think it's rushed. I think we all feel that way because even here, I would consider us three pretty relatively intelligent people here, and we're still struggling.
Sorry, Heather. David left you out.
Yeah, sorry, Heather. No, but my point is like we're all kind of living in this uncertainty on some of this because it's like there is nothing really set. So we're kind of jumping ahead saying this is what we're seeing happen, but we don't know. I mean, maybe we'll get some surprise. And again, not to plug Dwayne again, but I do think I'm actually looking forward to it because Dwayne is a guy that I've always he's been a mentor of mine for a long time, and I've always respected what he has to say. So
and
I'll
he's
be
so level-headed, and he'll remove emotion and break it down for us.
Sure.
Totally. Yep.
For sure.
All right. So now, kind of back to my point. So your training and when you're having discussions with your agents, whether it's on the hood of a car, whether we're talking about a Zillow lead or whatever the case is, we didn't have to. We always should provide value. We should always bring our proposition value, but we didn't always have to.
Correct.
We literally could have just met somebody at the house, let them in. Most of the time, in case the DOJ is listening, I'm going to say most of the time, seller's broker was offering compensation, and I could literally take somebody I just met with in 5 minutes and take them to the finish line because they did not have to worry about paying compensation. Now, it's changed in the sense that we now have to provide, we have to be better at providing and talking about our proposition value as buyer's agents. What are your guys' buyer value propositions? What are your agents telling buyers?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some adaptation there, right? I mean, and we're trying to see what their need is. I mean, that's part of that old. I mean, I actually really love the Zillow script from that side of it. Is that get all the key data from them and then find out what you need to be for them. Be that Band-Aid to whatever they need. And so for some of us, it's their first-time home buyer, and our added value in the first-time home buyer is we're going to do everything we can to negotiate the best deal to get closing costs because a lot of first-time home buyers need that. And so, again, you're listening to their story. You're finding out what they need, and you're trying to pivot yourself to being what you can be for them. And so, I would say a lot of the leads that we get in my particular field is a lot of investors, right? Hey, tell me how I can get the best return on my investment. And right now at 7.5% interest rates, that's tough. That's a tough sell on people that are going to get a loan for an investment property.
Even with 25% down.
Yeah, gosh, even with 40% down in some cases, it's crazy on that. So again, for me, it's not to try to sidestep your question, but it's trying to listen to what the buyer needs and then try to find out what we need to be for them and then go back and sell ourselves as that. And I think it's really important, if you're, in whatever agency side you're on, is to listen to your client first, find out what they need, and make sure that you're offering that to them. And then don't mishear me. Like, don't go out of what you can be, right? If someone says, hey, I'm looking for someone to go down to the courthouse and help me acquire properties, like that's not everyone's, that's not everyone's forte. And so don't go do that.
It is between October and March.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in my world of property management, right? I can't tell you, and I can go because Todd's been here with me the whole time, is that, 13, 14 years ago, when the market was tough, everyone wanted to be a property manager. So everyone would just show up and be like, hey, I'm going to be a manager today. And it's like, well, tell me why. Well, it's a little hard out there and I'm not making money. And like, that's all the wrong answers. Like, that's the reason why we make all of our agents go through the property management boot camp now, is because people were able to just sign up. They took really no interest in the field. They didn't listen to anything that was going on. They were just trying to find a way to collect money. And I think at some point, that's kind of where we're at now that's caused this, is that it became a transient field. And people were no longer, not all people, but a lot of people were no longer professionals doing their job. They were just basically taking a lead, showing up, and converting a deal. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but certainly there was some bad business that was done during that time that led to a lot of this stuff happening that's happening today.
Yeah.
And so for me, again, like, become experts in your field, understand what's going on, listen to these podcasts, listen to other successful business podcasts, and try to find ways to make yourself, to set yourself apart, to become unique.
So do you travel around in your car with any kind of forms? Because I feel like back in the day, I had this, I don't know, look like this
Folders.
big giant plastic file folder with all these folders, and every form, this is prior to the transaction desk and electronic centers, every form known to mankind in Armless, including, Todd, our 9-page lease purchase addendum was in there. And wherever I was at, I would go, I need this. Here's my buyer, here's my seller, sign. It's been many years since we've had to do that, but I don't know. I feel like now I got to drive around wherever I'm going and just make sure in my backpack I have some buyer broker agreements on me, because you don't know where the conversation's going to happen, take place.
Yep.
Well,
we'll just get you a good tablet and you can do it there. No, but on a serious note, one thing that I have considered, though, in this conversation is, like, we use a lot of templates on DocuSign. And so it probably is healthy to have a template for your buyer broker agreement set up in there, because essentially when you have a template, I don't know how familiar you are with them, but basically it's just a landing page. It'll say buyer 1 and their email, buyer 2 and their email, and you'll be able to basically put their name and email in, and send it off to them. And I'm not saying that's convenient. I'm not saying that's an easy conversation. I'm just saying that there is some options out there.
Have something.
Yeah.
Have some option. All right. Yeah. So Dave's also doing our IT class this week, where he's going to take everybody through technology.
Ooh.
All right. Let's switch gears, unless you had something else to add to the buyer broker agreement. I wanted to have this discussion with you. Obviously, you listened to Matt, Todd, and myself talk about where I'm seeing opportunities going, and you work with a lot of investors, and I find that agents that work with a lot of investors just have a different perspective on where the market's going, because they see things differently. What kind of conversations, because you mentioned that, right now with interest rates, it's hard to get that ROI for investors. But what kind of conversations are you having with, let's just say, new investors? I call you, and Dave, I wanna get into the Phoenix real estate market. I want to start investing. Tell me about the market. What kind of conversations are you having?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about on the purchase. Are you talking about the purchase all the way into
let's just say purchase.
Yeah, so I mean, on the purchase side, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. I would say the biggest opportunity that I found, and you guys kind of talked about it previously, was these distressed properties. And I don't even know if I'd go because I think people think distressed and they're saying, oh gosh, it's a full gut, it's a full remodel. I would say just dated homes that people have lived in, and that, you know, now they're going to sell for whatever reason, whether they're going to go into the forever home or they're relocating to Sun City or they just can't afford it anymore. But where I'm seeing homes not have a hard time selling is these homes that are fully done. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, right? People don't have free cash lying around to do these remodels after they acquire them. And so where I'm still seeing full price offers or over ask price offers is these homes that are fully done in areas that I would say are more centralized, right? And so for me, the biggest opportunities that I'm seeing is homes that, you know, maybe need a new kitchen or you know, need paint and carpet, and people don't have the cash for that. And so, you know, they're kind of like the last people they're the last girl to get asked out, so to speak. You know what I mean? And so that's really, for me, the properties we're trying to acquire. That's where I'm telling them, because first time, repeat investor, they all have different mindsets and different pressure points, but a lot of them are looking for, how can I be like the cheapest price in, or how can I feel like I'm walking in with equity? And so for me, that's the best way to walk in with equity right now. And you know, in my case, and I know that you have some similar resources, is that we can help them actually make them rent ready, to really improve the rental value. So that would be option one. I mean, the other option is that we're looking into new build still. We still do a lot of new build acquisition. You know, they're still buying rates down. And so that also offers them a different path. I mean, we had and we also try to look for communities that are brand new. Like, we want to be like the first 20 people in the door on those. So Alora Vita for us is one that we've been selling a lot. It's got really good rent returns. It's at 83rd and Happy Valley. It's going to be a really big part of the Northwest Valley and what they're trying to do there. And so that was one that we got on right away. And when we got on it, not necessarily for the return on investment on a monthly level, but on the return on investment on appreciation.
Yeah.
Like, we feel being the first in the door, and Todd's talked about it a lot too, is that, you know, that's going to allow us to really feel more than just that, you know, 7 or 8% annual return. We think it'll be much higher than that.
Yeah, the builder obviously artificially inflates the values every 5 sales. It's like, oh, we got progress, so maybe it goes up $5,000, and over time, a year or two in there before they finally close the subdivision out or the community out, you know, the property has this accelerated value growth because of it. Now, so do the properties in the area that might be comped with it. But the more important part was, you're buying a brand new property, state-of-the-art energy efficiency features, you know, in some of the more prime areas of the marketplaces. And you know, and again, even from an investor perspective, you've got longer expectations of roof life and appliances, and there's even warranties under certain things. Yeah. I mean, it's a no-brainer to look at a brand new home.
Well, you're mitigating risk. I think
Absolutely.
That's the thing that we talk about a lot. Like, that's my talk track a lot, is like mitigating risk.
Yeah.
I always tell them, my caveat to that is like, hey, when your first tenant leaves, we're gonna have to repaint the whole house. And they're like, oh, I don't get it. I'm like, well, it's flat paint. Mm-hmm. It's not meant to like last, you know, people being in there in and out multiple times. So that's the only caveat I have to the new builds, is the paint.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's really a low cost item. That's easy to.
So if you're working with an investor, like I come to you, and I'm looking for that opportunity to, you know, something that's a little outdated, whether I'm an investor or whether I'm a home buyer that has cash to do my own rehab. What's that magic number on days on market where you like, oh boy, all right, you know, there's different thresholds. Obviously, a house that just goes on the market, you can't lowball. Nobody's going to take anything because it's new. You know, there's difference between 30, 60, 90 days. What number gets you really excited? Like, now, David, you know, he's got his, you know, devil ears on, horns are coming out, going, I'm going to take advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I like to see it get past 60 days, but I'm also looking at, you know, have they had any price reductions? Because obviously, if you're seeing 60 days and they've had 0 price reductions, you're like, all right, well, I know what kind of seller this is. This is somebody who probably doesn't have a whole lot of flexibility for whatever reason that is, whether they're in such debt they can't take less or whatnot. I mean, we, you know, to your guys' point, we have it blows my mind on some of this stuff, and I think we'll see more of it. But we had someone that did a forbearance during COVID. And they both have great jobs with great income, and they got behind, and they have like 65% equity in their home, and they're like 6 months behind, and they can't get themselves caught up for whatever their other debt is. And so we're trying to list this, and now it's like they waited till the last second. I mean, we've got a foreclosure date of the end of August. Wow. And so you're feeling this pressure, and I'm like, you can't free fall this thing quick enough. And in my mind, to your point, is that, man, this is a really great investment, but I don't even want to be on that sticky path of that.
I will.
Yeah.
Let's
under contract.
Again, that goes back to everybody. I mean, if those of us who lived through the short sale period, and I know Dave, you did too. So David, but the thing is that we had systems. We knew what those systems were. We knew the processes. It was a no-brainer. It just became another standard transaction, just like the market we're coming into is too. But from an investor standpoint, I think the big thing is when you're looking at the older homes, the resale homes. There's especially the older ones, there's a lot of things to take into consideration. I go back to, Mike, 1995, 99, when you and I first met, and I look at the market from back then, and I look at Arizona has historically had a 4 to 4.5% appreciation rate. So I'm talking back to 1995. I know that was a long time ago, but just work with me for a second. And then, the prices were half what they are today. The average median, prices, average price was $167,000, not $350,000. And so we look at all these different numbers. The 4.5% appreciation. Guess what interest rates we were back then in the 90s? 7%. So investors were flocking to Arizona to buy properties here, thinking that they could get the desirable cap rates out of the properties because they could buy a home at an inexpensive home, $160,000. They could get a 4.5% rate with a 7% mortgage. Now multiply all that out. What they're getting is twice the appreciation today, but they're also getting twice the expense along with it because the prices have doubled. Yep. So those are some things to take into consideration. But Arizona historically and right now even in the marketplace is still considered one of the better places to buy, and it has a lot, David, as you know, about getting somebody out, that forcible detainer ability, where in Massachusetts it's 6 months. Out here in Arizona, it's 5 days.
All right, Dave, we got about 3 minutes left. What's the conversation you're having with sellers right now?
Well, it depends on whether I'm talking investor-wise or just your everyday seller. I would say on our investor side is, to Todd's point, we're actually, looking into people that have lots of equity to be able to go buy cash again. So this is still a good opportunity to sell what you've got if you can get it sold and upgrade into a newer home that gives you a little bit less risk. So that is something that we are still doing. But on the everyday seller is that, you got to get your home done. Has to look right. You don't want to be that person with the home that sits on for 60 days and then the Mike Weinsteins of the world, come through and they're like, got him. No, but on a serious note,
I walk through that door with a McRib in my mouth. I'll just have you know.
No, that's on your forehead.
Yeah, but on a serious note is that like if they want to really sell their home quickly and get as much out of it as they can, the home needs to look appropriate. It needs to be well done. It needs to be ready for someone that doesn't have to do another thing if they don't want to.
Right. All right, David. And so I feel like I'm going to have to prove myself that I'm not a shark, as I said. So next Monday on our 3-pack, we're going to walk through the options that we bring to the table when we have a seller that's 30, 60 days behind, so that you can see I'm not an evil guy. But David,
let me just close with David's comment earlier. You owe it to the client to find out what their needs are, and then you can be that for that agent and for that client, and then it might be something totally different for another one, but stay in your wheelhouse. I think that was probably take away for me some of the better advice for today.
All right, thanks, David. Appreciate it, man. All right, we leave everybody with the quote of the day: accomplishment will prove to be a journey, not a destination. Go out and sell a home.